If you're a creative person and you've ever been scared to go and see family or friends over the holidays, you're a bit apprehensive about what may happen, then this episode is for you. We want to talk all about some of the struggles that come along with being a creative person, especially over the holiday season, and catching up with people who may or may not understand what it's like to be a creative person. So in this episode, I want to run through a few things. First, starting with some of the things that family can say to us over the holidays that can make us feel a little bit bad about our job. I want to run through some examples there. I then want to talk about why those things make us feel so insecure, but also why people actually say them in the first place.
And then to wrap it up, we're going to talk about some things that we found helpful and other people might find helpful going into this holiday season with your friends and family. But to be honest, you can use it anytime you're hanging out with friends and family. But before we do jump into the conversation, we want to say that this is a general discussion. It is based and reflects our personal experiences and is general in nature. It is not intended and should not be used as therapy or professional advice. As always, we strongly encourage you to reach out to a qualified professional for support.
And I also want to preface to my family and friends who are probably listening to this episode that this is not a direct dig at them, but this is actually a question that I get a lot from a lot of different people who struggle, especially starting creative careers. It can be very uncertain when you start, and we've talked about it a lot before, about that it can take a lot of time to get off the ground when you're first starting. And for other people who are outside of a creative industry, they don't understand that. And so there's a lot of insecurity about starting that and how you can talk to friends and family about it. So that's why I bring up this episode, and I think it will be a really valuable one, especially at this time of year. Hopefully this will be out just before the end of holidays for the end of the year, but any time that you're tuning into this, I think it could be really helpful. Like Emily just said, we can always use these practical tips to help us through these conversations. But let's set the scene, because I think for a lot of people, they're probably, as they're listening to this episode, on their way home for the holidays and maybe hanging out with family, going home to see people that they haven't seen in 6 months, who knows, a year. And there are going to be conversations that happen. I find it very strange that one of the biggest conversations that we often have in the holiday period is around our work. Like the first question anyone ever asks you is about work. That's all that people seem to know how to talk about. And I always wonder why that is. I'm like, why can't people ask me about other things? Like it's always the first question, how's your work? How's your job? Like that's just the one question that family have always been prone to asking. Like they don't know how to ask anything more interesting. You know what I mean?
We all do it, right? Because if you think about when you go and talk to a friend, for example, one of the first questions you ask is how is work? And that's because our life can be so centered around work, because many people do work 9 to 5. Not to mention, usually for many people, it is a reflection of things that we do enjoy. And it feels kind of awkward. I don't know about you, but I find it kind of awkward sometimes to be like, so what hobby are you up to?
I think it's just an obvious question too, because everyone works. But I've sort of gone back on asking the work question so much because I know a lot of people are in between jobs, and I don't like asking them about work because it might not be something that they might not actually have a job right now. And so asking about work isn't as easy today as it ever has been, because people used to have stable jobs and work the same job for the past 30 years. So you could just ask them about the job because they've probably been in the same job that they're in this time last time you saw them. But it's weird now asking about work, especially people who do work for themselves. I think that's why a lot of family and friends might not have the skills to know what to ask, because you might not be working the same job that you were at the start of the year, or your job may be so nuanced that they just don't actually know what you do, so they don't even know how to approach it.
Yeah, and sometimes they're not even sure. I think people get confused, what is the definition of work? And I think that changes. I've seen it change for you, at least as a small business owner. Photography, for example, when you first started was something you were doing because you enjoyed it. And then it became more of I earn money sometimes off this thing, and then all the time. And it's is work something purely defined by, is this what you're doing to earn your main source of income? Does work mean anything that you do for an occupation or that occupies your time? So it can be really I think challenging. Like, I find it challenging sometimes to be like, particularly if I know someone has a small business, but maybe it's not their full-time income. It's like, how do I ask you something that encompasses both jobs or both ways of working?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up about the sort of difference between the hobby and the business, because like when I first started photography, it was just a hobby. Like I did it for 18 months without earning any income from it. And then when I started earning income, it probably wasn't my only job for the next like 2 to 3 years, like until it became sustainable. And so there was a lot of transition there and a lot of different points at which people could have asked questions where I was at completely different stages. And I know a lot of people, especially when they're transferring a hobby into a career, it can be hard for people to sort of keep up with what you're up to, especially if it's not like online. If you're not, like, I find it so weird now that people ask me things because they hear what I'm up to off Instagram. But if you're not someone that's actively sharing about the journey on Instagram, it can be hard because people don't know where are you still at that same position you were last year, or have you gone backwards, or have you gone into a completely different career? They don't know. So a lot of times, yeah, people just don't know what to ask.
Yeah. And like, you are seeing that transition yourself. So it's obvious to you, but it's not obvious to everyone else. And I think this is like maybe an interesting behind the scenes, is like, that's also largely why you started creating content online, is so that people then understood that that was part of who you are and what your goals are as well, which opened so much more conversation around our friends and family because they felt like they were invited into that conversation and that journey.
Yeah, and maybe that is something we can talk about towards the end in some of the practical solutions. It might not always seem an easy one, but yeah, maybe creating content and sort of talking about what you do more and sort of just starting that conversation really helps to give people an in. But I kind of want to go back and talk about some of the things that may happen, because I think there's a lot of people that are scared to walk into a room with family or friends who may ask questions or may make them feel bad about, I think first and foremost, and one of the biggest ones that I hear is that people don't take what they do seriously. Even if it has been something that they have been doing, if they've been working as a creative, as a photographer, whatever, for the past few years, family and friends still don't take it seriously. And it's one of the things that I struggle with so much because I'm on the inside, and a lot of us creative people don't understand how they don't understand that. But there can be a big sense of like them making like jokes about creative people not having a real job.
It's interesting because I think I sit on both sides of the coin, and it was a really steep learning curve for me when you were first transitioning into making photography your job, or even getting into photography, of like, yeah, I didn't know that that was the case. So I sit in both sides of this camp almost, of like, I understand, or I've been in the position where I couldn't understand that that was your job because you didn't earn money in the same way. You didn't work the same hours. So every single thing that had been role modeled to me about work and jobs looked completely different with you. So rewiring my brain that work and jobs can look thousands and thousands of different ways was a learning for me.
And I think a lot of people, especially starting, might actually work an extra job. Like I worked in hospitality for a long time. And so there was always that thing of like, I would always get people ask me about my hospitality job as if that was my real job, and then not often refer to my photography, my creative stuff as a real job. Like it was just a hobby. I feel like there's a lot of those little sort of underhand stabs that may not necessarily be bad, because yes, you may earn more of your income through your hospitality job at the start, right? But for you, that's not your job, or that's not a career. That's just a job that you have to sustain you right now. But your career is your creative career, and other people don't seem to have an interest in that, and they don't know how to approach that. So they go to what is familiar, which is your other hospitality job or your little admin job that you've got on the side that you're trying to help you sustain your creative career.
And it can be an easy question to ask because they know that that is your job, where they're not sure whether the other one is.
And I think it comes from, there's a big sense of like, people don't think any creative career is like very stable. And there's always that question as well, like, when are you going to get a real job? Because a real job is more stable. And I think we did see this kind of bit of a shift in the past few years, especially, during 2020, 2021, when people were losing jobs because they weren't able to go into the office and people had to lay off staff in careers that they'd had for years, right? All of a sudden they were out of work and they were like, well, maybe this career isn't as stable as I once thought it was. And I hope to see that changing, but I think it'll still always revert back to a creative career not being super stable in the eyes of other people and not offering as much income stability as well. Like it may not just be the hours that they don't reflect, like it's the income. And I think for a lot of people, they don't see that you don't earn the same income throughout the whole year. So therefore it's not a stable career choice. And I think that there's a lot of people asking about, well, how are you going to survive when you're older? Or what are you going to do for work after you do grow up? And small little things like this that they just imply that what you are working on right now isn't a real job.
Yeah, and we've even gone through this transition recently again, I think, as you've gone more into content creating. And also, I guess just on that point is I think you're right. Like a lot of young people, at least a lot of young people I see in and around my sphere, a lot of them are content creating. A lot of them want to be content creating, or a lot of them have a side hustle. Like heaps of people have small businesses that maybe they don't run completely full time, but at least have an interest. But that's where I think often, and I've felt it in a lot of different contexts. So when you do have family or friends hanging out, you're getting like a multi-generational perspective. And I don't think we can expect that grandma is going to have the same idea in content creating and small business as we do.
Yeah, and I think I flag some of these things because we recognize it, but other people might not. And so if you are in that position where you constantly get sort of questioned on your job or your creative career, I just want to make sure that people are aware that, it's not probably the right thing and you're not the only one who's experiencing that either. Like I think for a lot of years I was like, oh, well, there must be other people out there who have, really supportive families because their auntie and uncle were like a creative person, so they're more on board with it, right? I never had many creative people in my family that had ever started that type of job. Now, I'm not trying to say that they were unsupportive, but they were just unaware of what to ask. And so for other people out there, I just want to make sure that this is a very common experience. And if you are feeling that sense of apprehension that you don't want to talk about what you do for work in fear of being like a minimized, that's okay, because a lot of people do go through this, and hopefully today we can sort of work through some of the things that we can do to help ourselves either bring it up or to protect ourselves in that environment where people may just say things out of ignorance rather than trying to hurt you.
I know a conversation that we often have, and I'm a strong believer in that two things can be true at the same time. So like, what they said hurt me, or I'm hurt by what blah, blah said. But at the same time, they didn't know any better, and it wasn't ill-intended at the time. Obviously, every family dynamic is completely unique. And I think, if you are really struggling, again, like reaching out to support and seeking that individual support from a qualified person to help you navigate some of these, because it can be really hard.
I think the irony in all of this, and like what we were just saying, and like the generational thing and not understanding that a creative career can be sustainable, is like, I think we're starting to see a lot of those sort of old stable jobs becoming obsolete. And so the idea of me going to get an admin job or to go work in finance or banking or something like that would have been more stable back in the day, are now becoming like outsourced to AI. So they're not hiring as many people. And that career, investing in that as a skill set isn't as likely to move you forward in years to come as a creative career is. Because I think the biggest part about being a creative is your ability to, problem solve and to overcome these things. And we're used to being put into scenarios where, we're thrown in and have to sort of work out a solution to how we can survive. And that to me is a really strong skill set, but to a lot of other people, that's not necessarily believed in. And so I think there is a little bit of camaraderie, and hopefully we can talk about how to find community and have other people to talk to, because as creatives, we all understand this. I know there are also a lot of things that family might not say as well. Like there's a lot of the things that they can say, and probably a lot of like nasty things that do get thrown around in conversation when they're talking about your job. But I think a lot of that like nastiness can sometimes come across in the things that aren't said.
Yeah, I think there's often a lot of unsaid things that can be really hurtful for us. I know that, one that comes up and I've seen come up personally is, as we touched on before, the conversation centers around the typical work. So like 9 to 5, Christmas parties, for example, how much leave someone has around this time of year. They're all conversations that a lot of creators don't feel. And I'm sure you felt this too. Like you don't feel like you can contribute to because it's not how that business runs. I think similarly on that is one about the amount of work you have to do. And it's funny because before you got into this industry, I would have been one of those people to be like, oh, you can just take a break whenever you want, or like, why are you replying to this email, or X, Y, and Z. And now I'm on the other side, I can see like, because for small business, every payment or every job or everything you do directly impacts your wallet. And so like it can feel really hurtful or like unaffirming when you're in this big crowd and then you can't even join the conversation because it's not how how your work operates per se.
And that's not even to mention that this time of year is a stressful time for a lot of creative people. A lot of people running small businesses, they may have to either close down and isn't a lot of work over this time because everyone kind of goes on holidays, or this is a really sort of busy time for them because they do have a heap of work on, and you feel like you can't take time off over this time because it's a time where you may be a family photographer and you have a lot of work because a lot of families just sort of come together at this time, and that's when they want their big family like group photos together, or there could be like newborns over this period, or a lot of people do like proposals over this period. And so this could be a really busy time for you as a creative person. Either ends of the spectrum, it can be really stressful. And other people who can just walk away from their job for 2 weeks and come back to it and it still be there and okay, don't understand what it can be like to actually take time away from work, but not be paid to take that time away.
Particularly this time of year, around the holiday or the festive season, there are different expectations around spending as well. And so it can add to the stress for a lot of people. And then I wonder if it's like, because something that I think has helped me conceptualize it is a lot of people have worked casually before, or like in a job like that, particularly if while they're studying or in between work or whatever. I think we've all had that feeling of like when the boss calls you and is like, hey, there's this shift I need you to cover. And you're like, I don't want to do it, but if I don't get paid. But also similarly, like over the Christmas break or over holidays, it's literally like, yeah, if you don't show up and do the work, you don't get paid. So yeah, I think that's a way that I've helped conceptualize it, of putting myself in that.
We were kind of talking about the other day that in the year that I was first starting my photography business, did a wedding on the 29th of December or the 28th of December because I just had to do the work. Like I needed the income from that job, right, in order to sustain myself over that time. Like I didn't feel like I could turn that work down. And there's a lot of people just starting who don't feel like they can turn work down over that time. So if they do get an inquiry over that time, they always feel like they've got to be on emails answering because they don't want a job to go astray and go to another person, because that then could be a job that they might not work until, say, early Jan or end of Jan, but they might get the like inquiry now. And if they're not the first one to respond to it, then it might be the only one that they get. And so I definitely feel for a lot of people who are in that position where they may have to work, but then feel the sort of pressure from friends and family to have to take the time off. And these are a lot of those unsaid things of like, there's that expectation that you're just going to be there 100% with them. But you know that if you don't get these next few jobs, then you're going to struggle to kind of make it through the next few months.
I think that that's a difficult one because like even until your experience, like I didn't think about the fact that a small business owner, it's not just doing the work, it's like the admin before it, the planning, the then doing the work, and then the post, whatever, doing the work. Like for photography is obviously editing and then sending that to the client. That's all stuff. That's all the unseen stuff. So I think like I've seen for you, for example, like when people don't maybe acknowledge that or see that, it can be really hurtful because it's like, oh, I'm just working so hard here. Like I'm trying to do everything, and then I'm also trying to be a good family member or a friend or whatever it is, and like my bucket is full.
I really want to jump into some of the strategies and also like why these things can be really hurtful. But first, I just want to run through a quick sort of list of other things that may be specific to being a photographer, but I think that they're interesting because some of these things do come up over the holiday period, and especially when you're around friends and family. I think one of the biggest things as a photographer is just that it's implied that you'll be the one to take the family photos over the holidays, right? And just implied that it's easy, right? That isn't any extra work for you because that's what you do and you really enjoy the work. Might say, have you ever thought about doing like real estate? Because that's really, there's a lot of income to be like made in that area. Even, other small little things about like comparisons to other family members who've kind of done things as well, who may be around your age and who might make you feel like you haven't achieved as much because they've actually had a really, really successful year and you don't feel like you can be as proud or supportive of them because other family members are kind of using it to make you feel bad. So there's a lot of different things, and I think that I kind of want to flag them as like we all go through these things. And I've heard a heap of stories from other people, so you're probably not the only one who's feeling some of these things. But I kind of want to transition into understanding why people kind of say these things, but then also why they're hurtful, and probably why they're like more hurtful coming from friends and family over this period, because I think we can hear a lot of other things from other people in the world, but they're obviously not as hurtful as when they do come directly from friends and families.
Actually, I want to do a bit of a callback to one of the things you just said around getting people to take photos, or like, you're the photographer, take the family photo. And it's kind of funny, right? Because as someone on both sides, I know that for you, it's like, oh, this is my one chance. I don't have to take a photo. Now I have to take the frickin' photo. That's whatever. But, and it's annoying. Like, you just don't want to always be that or have that expectation. But then also on the family side, they are just trying to like pump you up and are like, you're the photographer, you're good at this. They've seen your photo and they want you to take that. And so it's funny. It's like that odd thing. And I think, it's always going to be a balancing act and always going to be challenging. And again, two things can be true. They can be trying to give you a compliment and it maybe didn't land, and that's okay. But I think there's a whole host of reasons that people do what they do. And I think as humans, we are social people and we really just want to belong. And so when there are comments that undermine maybe the work we're doing or don't affirm the work we're doing, it makes us feel lonely and isolated and like another person who maybe doesn't understand me. And I think when you're with your family, it can be a huge comparison game. Like, I'm having a direct, I have a brother and a sister, like in those moments, I'm having a direct view into two different live experiences and comparing them to mine, even though they might be completely and utterly, I know from my brother and sister, like they're completely and utterly different to my experience. So it's actually not even fair on myself to be comparing myself to them.
I'm glad you're here because I feel like you offer a different perspective of like, well, maybe this is why people say these things, and maybe it does come from a good place, because I think we can often feel in that moment when someone asks you, as you said, to do something, or they do say something towards you and ask about your job, it may sound like it's more like condescending than it is, because from them it may come from a good place. And so are there any instances where you feel like the reasons people ask things or say things to you is actually from a good place and from a really caring place that we may like misconstrue into being bad?
Yeah, I'm going to draw on an example from us, actually. And just because I feel like it illustrates the point quite well, and that is, I get quite self-conscious around what I do. I struggle a lot with self-doubt and self-esteem. And so talking about the things I'm doing or my goals takes me a lot of courage, and it's a lot of courage that no one else sees. So to get to the point to even bring it up and talk about it has taken a really long time, or a lot of mental energy for me. And I know that sometimes when I come to you and then you're like, oh, tell me about that. Why are you doing it like that? It's from a place of curiosity, but I just am like, why did you ask me why? Like, how dare you ask me why? And you're like, hold on, Emily, I'm just trying to have curiosity and examples. And like often when someone asks us why, we feel like then we have to, or At least I do. When someone asks me why, I feel like I then have to justify myself. And if I have to justify myself, it means maybe what I'm doing doesn't feel quite right. Whether that's true or not is a different topic. But yeah, I know that that's a conversation we have. And so you're not inherently asking me about a question, but you are, it still has a reaction in me.
That really comes back to what we were saying in the beginning, is that we want people to be more open and sort of ask us more questions. But sometimes, and I know I've been in that situation as well, where it can be confronting when people ask you specific questions around your work. And so we have to learn how to be open to answering those questions if we want to be asked more interesting questions than just about our job. When someone comes up and asks about what was your best experience this year, or what was the best thing you took for photos of, or where did you go this year, that may sort of come to you and be like, oh, well, I don't really know. I didn't really have that many good experiences. You might be getting a bit down about your own work, but you've got to come and answer those questions. Otherwise, they won't ever come again.
Totally. And I think like even asking about money can often feel like a bad thing, but maybe, as we said, like there's a generational thing. Maybe they're just like, how do you make money? Like I know we've had conversations with family and it blows their mind to think you earn money online. Like what? How do you do that? And it is a general curiosity and trying to understand. I do want to acknowledge though that some families can be toxic and there can be things that are not healthy. And so obviously I don't want to say that everything everyone says is fine, because I can't say that. Like I don't know individual families, but I do acknowledge that of course there are times where people are asking things from a willful intent.
I think, yeah, there are also times, yeah, when people might not have the best intentions either. And I think sometimes it even comes out of a place of them feeling insecure. And you've talked about the whole age thing, the whole generation thing. Like having a secure job was a really important thing back when they were ending school and trying to go into the workforce. But now for you, being a bit more free with it and being unemployed for a little bit of time and then back into this creative job and then out of it and then into this other job, to them that seems like you're not successful, or you're not having things worked out, or that you're not looking after yourself in the best way, and that it may just come from a place of caring, but it also may come from that ignorant place as well of like they're just reflecting on what they thought back when they were first ending school or whatever. But it can also be, equally just as much as of them reflecting on the opportunities that they didn't have when they were at that age as well, and feeling like they weren't able to take that chance. Like they were very risk averse. And so to see someone who is trying actively can sometimes like trigger something within them to say, well, I had this opportunity and it wasn't able to work for me, or I wish I could have gone out there and done my own creative thing or ran my own small business, but I didn't get the chance. So I kind of don't want you to get the chance either. So I'm going to make you feel bad. And I think in those sense, it can become a bit toxic when you're having those conversations with those people who probably don't actually want to see you win.
Yeah. And I think the way that I have personally tried to maybe navigate that feeling is trying to meet your curiosity with my own curiosity of like, okay, well, let me just try and answer it and see where their intent was. What lane were they taking? Were they taking like a curiosity? How does this work? I'd love to know more. Maybe they want to get involved in small business and they're like, hey, this is a great conversation to have. Or maybe it does take another track and it starts to get into maybe not comfortable conversations. So I think that's something I do. Like when you ask me, why did you do this? Or what was that about? Or tell me more. It's like, okay, Emily, just take a moment. Let's like give a seed back and like, let's meet a little bit of curiosity back. And then that allows me time to see where the conversation goes. Obviously, I know with you, it's not willful, but even having that conversation, like for me, it's teaching myself that it's okay.
How much should we come back with another question or answer them as if we're trying to see the best in them? How much should we see the best in those sort of questions? And is it worth giving something back? And then how do we know when to stop? Like when does it become too far where they're just starting to get too like nasty and you probably should just ignore them?
It's a hard question. I think it's so individual. For me, it depends on the topic. There are topics that I don't want to touch. And so I divert, I'm like, I might give a little answer. So like, example, right? Like maybe someone is talking about money and I don't want to talk about money. And they said to me like, oh, Emily, like, how do you even earn any money? I'll be like, well, I have a job. Like, of course I earn money, and then have a question ready to go back. Or I might be like, how do you earn money? Getting people to think about their own, like, so I often reflect back the question, or at least that's what I try to. But I think it is really individual and what your values are and like how you want to go about it.
I've certainly played that game before where people are offering you a new job or something, or a new like career opportunity with Uncle John's friend who owns this business and he's like looking for someone, and you're like, oh, that'd be really cool. And you're kind of playing off it because in that like a moment, it can seem like it's hard to get out of that. So you just have to play along with it. Even though that isn't ever something that you're going to do, you're just playing along with it at the time because it can be hard to confront that, hey, no, that isn't a good opportunity and that's not what I want to do. And so sometimes, like, especially with the whole like, money thing, when they ask about it, it could start from a place of curiosity of like, yeah, how do you like make money? How much do you make with this? And if anyone asks, I'm always happy to share. But then when it becomes like, oh, well, I earn more than you and I'm going to offer you this new job because like that's the only thing that I prioritize, well, that's where I take a step back because for me, like money's not the only thing. And I try to present that as well of like, well, yeah, but I have way more like flexibility than you have and I get to do things that I enjoy every day. So like money's not the main priority. And sometimes that's just not an argument that's worth having. But starting that conversation a little bit, you've got to kind of go into it rather than just closing it down from the start because you just don't ever know where that could go.
Yeah. And again, it comes up to like what you're comfortable with and how you respond. If it's a conversation that you're completely uncomfortable with, I think it's okay to just redirect or move that conversation along in a way what feels comfortable for you. So like for me, as I said, I'd reflect the question back, or like I would make a joke, or I know you're very sarcastic, so you'd probably say something sarcastic and move it along.
I would say that a lot of creative people are pretty reflective as is. And so one of the biggest things for me is like thinking about why these things hurt as much as they do. Why do people asking questions? Why do people like saying things to me about my job or career choices? Why do they hurt? Why do they sting in the first place? Because I often think that if I was really secure on what I did, they wouldn't really hurt. Like, of course, they're not trying to hurt me. Like friends and family, I think their heart of hearts are trying to be supportive. They just might not know how. So if I just think about these things as being framed in a really good way, that they're trying to help, but they just might not know the best way to ask, then why do they hurt in the first place? And it could come back to the fact on me, and especially when I was starting, that I didn't have everything worked out and I wasn't really happy with where I was in my career yet. Like you may be like 2 years into starting your creative business, but not feel like you have the like freedom that you expected to have, or you may not have the amount of work or the amount of income that you expected to have. And so you're a bit insecure about it. So when you get asked those sort of questions, it can feel like a personal attack on you, but really it's just that sort of deep down that you're not where you would like to be.
Obviously, like there are a myriad, huge amount of reasons why you might be feeling that way. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I know I feel that way. You've felt that way. And again, that's why like we encourage so much, like go talk to someone, talk to a qualified professional who can sit and kind of explore some of these things with you. If, you're able to do that, I think there's so much value in understanding that a little bit more for yourself, so that when you are in these situations, you do feel a bit more empowered to, I guess, stand within your own power, essentially. And that's why, like, I am always going to be big on, like, definitely go and, if you can, seek a professional support because they can do amazing work in these areas.
It's almost unfair, though, I think, that as creative people, we are already pretty introspective and we already think about these types of things. And the biggest reason why creative people want to do what they do is because they want to do what they enjoy every single day and they really care about their work and what it is they're doing for a career. And so these things do hurt us a lot, like more, because we've already thought about these types of things versus, your cousin who works in finance who doesn't really care, when people ask them about their job, they're just like, oh, I don't care. I do other things outside of my work, and that's where I find all my enjoyment, right? And so they can just deflect and they don't really care, and they don't have to be super introspective because they're probably not that type of person anyway. But for us as creatives, the unfair advantage is that, you know, we do always think about these things. And so, yes, I think it is really important to go and talk to someone else and try to flesh out a few of these things and why you're feeling a little bit insecure about these things, or where you are in your own headspace at the moment, because then that can help you to unlock a lot of other things or what you should do moving forward. But in the moment, that can be really hard to step away and to put yourself outside of the type of person who would care.
It is always difficult. And I think that sometimes it can be like, why do I have to do the work? Like, why do I have to be the one? I guess the way I kind of also think about that when you were talking is like, you're comparing right there, like comparing the difference between the work you have to do and your cousin who may be a banker or may be whatever has to do. And like, we all have stories and lived experiences that probably, I think everyone would benefit from therapy. And it's like, yeah, maybe they have their own work that they need to do, and that's okay. But I think that's empowering on itself to be like, what is in my control and what can I do to help myself in this situation?
So what is in our control? What sort of can we do to overcome some of these feelings? I think I want to first kind of talk about what can we do to prep, because we're here like expecting these things to come. And so what are some of the things that we can do to get ourselves in the right place to either like reflect that energy from other people, or to be able to confront it and be okay with it?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest one for me, at least, is I think that self-care should always be proactive and not reactive, or it always works best for me on a proactive approach and not a reactive. And I want to kind of be clear about when I talk about self-care, it's anything that fills your cup, anything that makes you feel rejuvenated in some way, shape, or form. But it doesn't have to be a big thing. Like for me, I really like slow coffees in the morning. It really helps me feel grounded. Walking is another really important one for me. Like so often we're like, oh, I don't feel like going for a walk, but you always feel better. Well, most of the time you feel better. I do anyways, having that routine. And I think the reason I bring that up is because I think if you start to put those practices into your life now, you're going to get used to it, and then you're already having. So it's not going to be something new you have to develop around Christmas. As you said, like creators, photographers specifically are really busy around Christmas time. So I try and imagine that like self-care isn't something I'm trying to build when I'm super busy. Like it's something I want to be building before I'm busy, and that I can lean on when I need it.
And so how do we put those practices, in place as we start to, go away from home, away from our regular scheduling, and go and hang out with family over the holidays if we're away from where we normally are? How do we maintain those practices when it can be weird and hard around people who may see that as a way to sort of poke holes at you or ask weird sort of questions that you don't want to really talk about?
Well, so an example that I'd use is like I drink peppermint tea pretty much every night. It's like a nightly routine. So I take peppermint tea. And if that is just something I do regularly, no one's going to be like, why are you drinking peppermint tea? Like that's odd, because people know I bring peppermint tea. So like, and it's something I can do. It's a very small thing, but helps remind me of like things back home. Same with walking. Like if you went for a walk every day, no one's going to be like, why are you going for a walk all of a sudden? Like maybe they will, but like if it becomes part of your routine, I feel like it helps you, but it also sometimes can help other people know that that's part of your everyday routine. I also love super underrated thing in your 20s, I think particularly, but is putting a thing in your calendar, like a reminder in your calendar to do something, whether that is like take your medication or go for a walk or I don't know, have a glass of Coke, whatever it is for you. Because when I'm busy, I totally forget what I have to do or what actually makes me feel good. So I use my calendar so much more now than ever. And yeah, I think that's the way, like small little ways that I make sure I can do that when on the road or.
It's really important to stay in that routine because the big part of how you interpret what other people have to say to you is based on like where you are. Like if you're having a bad day and someone says something to you, then you're automatically going to react a lot worse than if you were already having a good day. And that's why it's like important to like still sleep, to still stay hydrated, to still exercise if that's something that you do in your normally routine. If you like meditate, if you still journal, like do those things continually through the holidays. And if you just do them from the first day you arrive with your family, then hopefully they don't ask you questions when you all of a sudden, like if you were just to start, on the day after you had a big argument, they're going to be like, oh, well, why'd you do that? Like if you all of a sudden start exercising and decide to go for like a drive to go then for exercise or head to the gym or whatever, they're going to be like, oh, why are you just trying to get away from us? But if that was a practice that you were already starting from the first day you arrived, then it doesn't look as weird. So I think that those things help our own like a mental space first and foremost to be in a good place and not react, but also sort of preempt anything that could happen afterwards to give you that out because it's just part of your routine anyway.
Like we can get like a little bit creative with it. So maybe go for an hour run. Usually maybe it has to be 30 minutes or like maybe you need 10 minutes away. Okay, well, you know what, guys? I'm getting takeaway coffee for everyone today, or I'll do the coffee runs, or I'll get the groceries, or I'll get the petrol, whatever it is. I think we can become a little bit creative in that way as well. Just because I have peppermint tea usually at 9:30, maybe I'm having it at 10, maybe I'm having it at 8:30. That flexibility within myself, but I know I can have that flexibility because I've already built the routine. So now it's easier to build in the flexibility.
And then what about in the moment? If someone says something to you and you feel yourself getting a bit like anxious to respond or even angry to respond to them because they've had something really bad to say, how can we help control ourselves in that space? And what can we do throughout that kind of day when we have to be in a confined space with these people? Because I think that's one of the hardest things, that we can't just often walk away. Like these people are here around us for hours. These people may not be people we've seen in a long time, so they don't know how we're going to react. Have you got any tips that we can use to, ease the blow if something does happen?
No one can control what uncle's going to say or auntie's going to say. No one can control, we can't control what comes out of other people's mouths. And unfortunately that, holiday time tends to be a lot where people feel comfortable. There's sometimes alcohol involved. But I think in terms of like something that has helped me is really preparing for common actions and or common things people say, and not only preparing. And when I say preparing, like I will imagine what could they possibly say, right? Like what might be some things, what might be in their personality, whatever. And then also practicing what I would say in response. And I think sometimes, like I know when I read something online and it's, I don't know, like someone giving advice on how to set boundaries, I'm like, whoa, that does not sound like me at all. So I think really customizing it to what I sound like I might not say, hey, mum, and do this big spiel or whatever, but I might say like, that's a weird thing to say out loud, or like have a joke ready to go back, or a way that you can move the conversation onwards. So whilst that might not be an in the moment, I think I know it helps me because it's like, well, I know that this comment was coming. I've prepped and I've practiced for what was coming down the line there.
I think that's really important. And I wanted to pick back up on what you said earlier, was like one of the ways that I sort of counteracted what people would say was by sort of sharing more of my journey online. And not sort of counteracting what they would say, but allowing them an in. Because I think sometimes people just want an in. Like people don't know what to ask. And so sometimes the first thing that comes out of their mouth might not be the best thing. And so allowing them something to ask or something to talk about is important. And the way that I did that was just by sharing more on Instagram or wherever it is for you, so that friends and family have some sort of context as to what it is you're up to right now. Because the worst thing to get asked is, how is your job, when you just ended your job like a month ago and they don't realize that. You don't want to be in that position. And sometimes as creative people, we may work on a bunch of different jobs where we had a job this time last year and we're not working on that job anymore because there was a bad thing that happened. And now we're working on this new job that we're really interested to talk about. But because you haven't told anyone about it, they don't ask about that. They ask about the job that you're not working on anymore. And, that can upset you. So maybe just framing it in the start of like, well, I'm going to start sharing more online, or even have that conversation when you first like arrive. Like, be open and transparent with what it is that you're up to at the moment. If you have started a new job, just be honest about it. And so that can be something that you talk about.
So that's interesting you brought that up, because we've had that conversation before around, like, I'm a very talkative person in general and family situations. You are less so talkative or open about maybe what's going on. And we've talked about this idea like when people have asked you, how are you? Instead of just saying, oh, I've been really busy, or, oh yeah, good. It doesn't invite the information in. So even if you're comfortable being with like, oh, great, I just photographed a wedding on the Central Coast or something, or good, I've been working on X, Y, and Z. It can be whatever you choose, which I love, because then it's like, for me, that's empowering to be like, oh, I got to choose what I told you. But then it allows further questioning as well. And I know that that's been something that we've talked about in our household, and something that we've been trying to implement. And I know I've been challenging myself as I'm going through a lot of like career transitions and stuff, not to just answer with, oh, I'm busy. That's how I've been.
Being able to give longer answers, I think, is really a skill. Like, it's something that I've had to grow over having like the podcast as well, and trying to get people to answer questions back. Like, even your example there of, I just photographed a wedding on the Central Coast. Like, even that's not a very long sort of answer, but people could pull a lot from that. They were like, well, they knew you had to be on this Central Coast, so they could ask about where you like stayed on the Central Coast, or what else did you do while you were there. They could specifically ask about your work because they know what you do for work now because you sort of answered. They could ask about the wedding, or like anything to do with that industry. Like, there are so many things they could pull from that, rather than just a blanket answer of like, oh, it's been really hard. Like, there is nothing I can get out of that. Like, there's nothing else I can come to. And so I think as people, we need to be more open. And I think this is why one of the biggest things is like walking in there with that open headspace of like, not everyone's trying to have a stab at you with everything that they say or everything that they ask. They may just be genuinely interested. And if you don't give them anything to go off, then it can be really hard for them to continue to ask things. And so they resort to just asking about your job, or they just ignore you and ask everyone else in your family, and then you end up being isolated. So maybe that first interaction has to be a really strong one. And then if it does go downhill, well, hopefully we can put some of those other things in place to realize, oh, hang on, this is headed in a bad direction. But if you don't start on the right foot, it can be hard, and then you can lead yourself ending up in the position that you were sort of the most scared of anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to use an experience or something that I've been doing this year, or struggling with and challenging this year. And that is around, I kept asking people what they did for work, or what do you do for work, or what do you do? And I felt like that wasn't aligning with my values anymore. I felt like that, like, I don't necessarily always want to be asked that. And I truly don't know anyone, because not everyone does what they love for work. So saying what you do for work wasn't letting me know someone. And so I've been trying to experiment with ways to get around that. And it's like asking people specifically about their hobbies, because that allows me to know them some more. And what that has taught me is, one, people love talking about other things outside of work usually, or like people are really interesting and have so much going on. But it's also given me grace to be like, life is really busy. I don't remember what to ask all the time. And so I was reverting into asking people what they do for work. But now, as I'm like, I ask a friend, do you read? And they tell me a book. It already leads me up for success, because now the next time I'm like, how was that book you read? I've tried to remember one piece of information. And a tip I actually saw recently online, and I've been trying to do, not super successfully, but trying, is actually like writing down your interactions with people. So say you go to a friend, you only see them every 3 to 6 months, being like, I'll use you. Mike said he's reading blah, blah, blah. Mike says he's watching blah, blah, blah. Mike said this happened in his life, to remember it, and then going back in. But what I'm trying to get out there is, we all forget sometimes what's happening in other people's lives. So actually saying what you're doing is giving yourself grace, and giving, like, myself a pat on the back of like, yeah, I did actually do that thing. That was pretty cool. But it's also giving like the other person grace that, look, maybe they've had a full on year, maybe they'd have a full on month. They don't remember what was going on in my life. So like a quick little recap is okay. But then you're like, I get to choose what I say. Like, if I want you to know that I'm reading, romantasy, and that's going to be our connector, cool, let's go. I'm giving that to them as the connector.
I thought that was such an interesting point about like writing down or journaling a few things about different people so you can reflect on them next time. But also I think like we have to be the change that we want to see. And if you expect other people to be up to date with everything that you've been working on, well, you've got to be up to date on them as well. And so maybe it might just be looking over a few of your friends and family on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, just to see what they've been up to and see what they've been up to for work or, end of year hobbies or what like sports are they playing at the moment or whatever the case may be, just so you can have something to talk about, just an in. And maybe if you can like find that one family member who's also about your age and who's also a friend who you can be close with and have that connection so that then you can talk with each other, that then allows other people into that conversation because you have a starter together. Because it can be really isolating for some people who feel like they don't have anyone they can talk to. So just finding someone, and as you said, finding some connection to talk to is really important, because it then makes you feel like, oh, well, I'm not just here on my own. I now had some sort of conversation.
And it's interesting that you brought up you posting on social media just before, because that's essentially, and you're saying you struggle with long answers, like that's essentially what you're doing. You're giving someone a long answer in a way that feels comfortable for you. So like maybe that is like you put some stories up before Christmas or whatever. I think that like you are doing that, but just in like a different way. But again, this is where I like draw back on like preparing, because I know that like if someone asks me what most recent movie I've watched or like what I'm interested in or what my hobbies are, you can draw a blank pretty easy. So even just thinking about like, oh, how would I respond to that question? Even like I'm sure people listening right now are like, how would I respond to that question? And so even just getting those cogs turning, because now when someone does ask you, well, what's your favorite hobby? You're probably more likely to have an answer.
And then what about after the holidays? Are we all just going to go to a spa day and just have a really reset and then get back into the new year? Or what are some of the other things that we could be looked to do after the fact to sort of decompress and get back on with everything?
Well, I think this actually I think is good before, during, or after the holidays. But I find it really helpful, and I know we find it really helpful to connect to safe places and people. So for us, we love the coffee shop. We're not particularly like I don't talk to the barista outside of the coffee shop. But when I'm in there, I feel a sense of belonging and I feel a sense of connectedness because they greet me. They say hi, they're excited, or like they're providing a service, or like even I know for you, like sitting in a room that you can hear lots of chatter is nice because it makes you feel less isolated. Finding those places can be really helpful for some people, or at least have been for me. And similar with people, like you are my safe person. I have friends who are my safe people. Like that can be friends, family, acquaintances, whatever, or it could be a professional as well. And reconnecting, and I think that comes to that before, during, and after. Like if you already have, say, a therapist or a counselor or a supportive person who you're seeing, like checking in with them is and can be really helpful. And I think afterwards we talked about self-care. Self-care doesn't just, I think self-care should be an ongoing practice, something that we implement all year round. And so, but there's different levels, or there can be different levels. Like for me, I like having a slow coffee. It gives me like a little bit of self-care. But then there are bigger times where I'm like, I just want to go read for 3 hours, or I want to go to a bookstore, or I want to go on a weekend away. And they're the bigger ones for me. And I know particularly that if I'm going into a hard time for myself, then that's when I need to be like, okay, well, afterwards, I'm going to go out for ice cream. Like that's my big one for doctor's appointments, right? Like if I have a doctor's appointment that I'm dreading, I imagine and plan what I'm going to do post that doctor's appointment, because it's like, it gives me something to look forward to, but then also helps me, I don't know, like decompress following what is a stressful situation for me. What are
After
some
this,
things that you like to do?
yeah, I think after this episode, I'm going to go and like plan to go catch up with some friends, either just before the new year or after the new year, to sort of be that new thing. Because I think we forget to prioritize investing in the relationships that we want to continue on. Often, like, I can see my friends way more than I see my family per year, but I feel like I have to give so much of my energy over to family in those 3 days over the holidays or whatever the case may be, because you know that you are right there and you're spending like 12 hours a day with them. But when you catch up with friends, it might be just an hour here and there, but you do sort of see them more often. And so maybe it is like prioritizing for like in the new year to be like, well, look, I want to go and spend time with these people. I didn't get to choose that I had to go home or had to go to an uncle's house for Christmas or New Year's or whatever the case may be. But I do get to choose who my friends are. And so I can go and prioritize, well, hang on, I'm going to choose a day to have a call with this friend who's overseas. And then I'm going to go and actually go and plan a little like New Year's like trip with these other friends because I want to go and hang out with them. And having those things in your schedule as something to look forward to can be really helpful as well. Like you just said, like planning into the future to make sure that all isn't over in these holidays. Like there is still things into the future. There are still really good things happening, and just adding things on your schedule like a now can help you going into that because you know you've got something to look forward to.
Yeah. I think that, of course, like holidays and family can be a really difficult time for a lot of people for a number of different reasons. And so, yeah, having that proactive approach, if you're able to, can be really helpful for some people. And I think that's a great idea. I think you should go plan and hang out with friends.
I think I will, and I think we should also plan some time together. And I want to say thank you for being here today and having this conversation, but also just being really supportive. You've always been someone that's really supportive to me, and I hope that other people have someone that they find really supportive for them as well, because it can be hard to get through those periods around other people who may not understand, and it may be a really hard time of year for a fair few people. And I want to make sure that I'm aware of that. I'm always there on Instagram, but I think like other people as well, like if like Instagram is your place, if TikTok is your place, then feel free to be on there during the holidays, even if your family make you feel bad for it. If that's where your friends are and that's your space where you feel okay, well, it's okay to be there. And I don't want to make people feel bad for that ever, because I know how hard it can be.
I really appreciate having this conversation, and it's always a pleasure getting to learn, I think, being on both sides of the coin, as it were, around being in a very non-creative industry and trying to relearn my brain, or rewire my brain, I should say. But I want to just on the fact of like finding those spaces during that time, and really give a call out to the fact that crisis support is available. And if you do need that, there is absolutely no shame, and we strongly encourage you to reach out to any crisis support or individualized support that's relevant to your local area. And I will give Mike some resources to put in the podcast description. We are based in Australia, so they are likely to be the Australian-based support systems. However, please check all your local supports in your area, and just know that it is completely okay and normal and really reasonable to reach out to these supports all year round, but particularly during hard times like the festive or Christmas season. And know that, yeah, if this is something that you're struggling with, or whether that be for yourself, struggling navigating family, struggling navigating small business, that definitely reach out to a qualified professional.
And if you are someone who's not able to have a break over this period, if you're someone who is still like working through the holidays, through the New Year period, then I'd strongly recommend like planning in a time to have a break, you know, in the new year. I think one of the biggest hacks is just like planning a holiday, because then you have to go and you have to have time off, because it can be so easy just to continue to work through. And as people who enjoy our jobs, it's easy to work through, but there's always highs and lows. And if you don't plan and you're not like proactive in having a break every now and again, even if it is just an extended weekend away every now and again, it can slowly eat up at you. So do please plan some time off if you are working over this holiday period, and make sure you like look after yourself.
And little breaks work too, whether that's like you have an hour tea break or a lunch break or whatever. Like, you know, maybe a holiday seems really big at the moment. So finding those small wins is really helpful as well.
Thanks so much, Emily. We'll put all your links down below. You've been really helpful for people, I'm sure. And if you have enjoyed this episode, if you're watching on YouTube, do leave us a comment down below to let us know what you're going to do over the holidays and what you do for support and to help yourself, because I'm sure other people would be interested. But also, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, do feel free to send us a message on Instagram. We try to get back to those as well, and we'll definitely be uploading some things from this episode, so feel free to leave them under some of our posts on Instagram, because they'll be really helpful for other people. But until next week, guys, I'll be back again with another episode. But happy holidays, and I'll probably talk to you again soon.